You know, I haven't really hit on, at the beginning of each chapter, I had mentioned to you that there are benchmarks or objectives. So under screening, let's take a look at that. Screening, average number of hours needed to make a screening decision. At least a pre-approval. That's on page 80 in the current edition that we're dealing with right now. Average, but it's the first page under screening applicants. Average number of hours needed to make a screening decision. What's the big deal? Remember, I'm doing this not just for myself, but for my assistant who's following me. I want them to know that we want to make a decision, at least a pre-approval, within 2 hours, 1 hour, 3 hours, whatever it is for you. For me now, I want it to be done within 2 hours at the most. Remember, I'm going to go back and verify stuff, but I want to be able to respond promptly to individuals. Why? Because I used to have individuals who would come back, we'd get back to them a day or two later and say, you were approved. Well, I'm sorry, we've already found a place. And the very ones who would do that, say that, are the very ones that we would love to have. The reason they found another place so quickly is because they were great applicants. But some landlords, and I used to be one. I gotta verify everything. I gotta make sure. Well, I found if I go back to them and I say within an hour or two, you've been pre-approved, they won't keep looking. And I can still do my verification. Because I can always come back to them later and say, there was something that we could not verify, confirm that was on your application. I'll give them an opportunity to, wait a minute, let me do whatever's necessary to find out what you found out and make sure it's correct. So that's an objective. Another objective under this, minimum time period for giving an approval, average number of hours needed to make a screening decision, and then maximum time period for giving that approval is final approval. So within a couple of hours, I want to be able to say a pre-approval. Within a day, I want to be able to tell the applicant you're approved and let's bring the deposit in. With each applicant, identify at least one thing a prospective resident wants that may affect the rental price. As part of the screening, we ask questions. I mentioned one to you. How much are you paying at your current home? Another question might be, do any of you ever have residents who ask you, can you work with me on the deposit?
Oh, yeah.
We have a policy now in which we say to people, we'll work with you on the deposit. Instead of paying a full deposit, you can pay half of it if you want the rent increase. And we'll increase the rent by 5% and cut your deposit in half. Guess what, folks? By the end of the first year, guess who has the more money? I do. So that's a screening question might be, how many years do you plan on staying here? 1 year, 2 years, or 3? And if they tell me up front 2 years or 3 years, I'm looking at that as affecting my income. Somebody who's going to be more of a long term than a short term, I'll get more income in the long way. But that's one of our screening questions on the application. Another question might be, would you like to have one of the upgrades that we make available on the property? Would you like a deluxe home or a customized home? Deluxe is somebody who wants all 3 or 4 things. A customized is somebody who just wants 1 or 2 things. Is that going to affect my income if they pick 1 or 2 things? In other words, I want my assistant with each applicant, if they are saying something that we feel will add to our revenue, add to our income, be a better decision for the company, I want to know that. Not just are they qualified, but is it something, one of the questions that are asked purposely to see if they're going to be a better fit long term, let me know that. Now, in terms of screening, your selection goes application process, traditional, pre-screened by phone. A lot of times, first thing we'll suggest is go by and take a look at the outside of the property. Any of you do that? Why do I do that? Make sure they're really interested in that particular home. Again, I'm just giving you different things. Schedule a showing. Do your homework. By the way, that pre-screen, that does mean pre-screen. We ask questions specifically to make sure we should go further. Schedule the showing. Grade on cooperation. When my assistant turns an application in, I always ask her, give me a grade on their cooperation. 1, 2, or 3. Because if they're not cooperative, we're not going to go much further. Ask all. Now here's one that you may not be doing. Ask all to complete a guest card. That's when they come to show a property, see a property. They may not fill out an application, but everybody fills out a guest card. How's that benefit me? I have a record who was there, but also some people fill out a guest card, I might want to rent to them. So I'll follow up with the people on the guest card because I've asked a few questions to kind of get an idea of, is that somebody I would want to rent to? We have minor things. It's not a full application, but just where are you working at the current time? How long have you been there? Little basic questions. Do an application. Give pre-approval. And I talked about that. How soon do I want to give a pre-approval? Within a couple of hours. Then I complete the verification process. Notice, by the way, before we finally give the final approval, last thing on the list, do the in-home visit. You may say, okay, Jeffrey, what does that mean? Does that mean you do an in-home visit with everybody? No. Because my process is in stages, when they first do the application, I told you, I look at it at face value. So if you don't have enough income on face value, we don't have to go any further. There's no need to go further. If you don't have enough rental history, it's no need to go further. In other words, you got to meet the pre-approval stage. Then you got to meet the full application stage. And then all those who remain. So if it started out with 5 people, now we only have 2 that actually made it through the first 3 steps. How many people actually go to see the home? Just 2 of the 5. Is everybody with me on that? So when you heard me say earlier, I do an in-home visit, that's not on every home or every applicant. It's only on those who pass the first steps. Any questions on that?
Question on your in-home visits.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever turned it into a marketing tool and bought those properties?
Good question. No, I have not. However, one of the things that, you got my mind thinking on how that could be possible, but I have turned in which I have a vacancy and I give letters to all of the neighbors. In my Hello Neighbor letter, it says, if you know of somebody who's interested in moving into the neighborhood, if you would like us to give you a price, an offer on your home, we would be glad to do so. So I turned that into a marketing letter. And I've actually been able to purchase properties on the same street from properties I already own because of the relationship that I developed with the neighbors and letting them know that we'll be glad to rent your property. And for the in-home visit, do I call and say I'm right around the corner? No. I schedule it. I don't do that because I don't like to surprise people. I don't want them to surprise me. Now, we're not going to make it 2 weeks or 1 week later. It's going to be done within 24 to 48 hours after I call you. And you say, well, Jeffrey, that gives them time to get the place looking right. No. The kind of things I'm looking for, they can't get right in 24 hours. Holes in the wall, they can't get right. Damaged by the pet, they can't get right in 24 hours. Home that's smelling real bad for whatever reason, they can't get that right in 24 hours. So the thing torn blinds and screens. They can't get that right within 24 hours. So it's not about just surprising you. I'll give you time to tidy up. Big deal. I'm not there to check your cleanliness. I'm there to check for damages, potential hazards in the property that you have created. So does that answer your question? All right. In terms of forms, any questions, or where are we? Let's see make sure what's on the next. Oh, notice at the bottom, one of the things that we're adding to our application, part of the process is that we must visit your home. Part of the process is that we must visit your home. So it states right on the application. So some people won't go further when they see that, which is fine, because I'm not looking for you if you don't want to have that take place. If you don't have that on your application, consider adding it. Here's my biggies in terms of screening criteria. I've got a lot of little things I look at, but here's the biggies. Income, rent ratio. You know, how many of you use 2.5? You got to make at least 3 times the rent. 3.5 times? 4 times? 2.5 times. I got one person 4 times. Everybody else pretty much 3 times?
Even less for the room.
Say a little bit less for what?
What I had the room room? For the rooming house?
Oh, for the rooming house is a little bit less.
Yeah.
Gotcha. You sold it, I heard.
Yes.
Okay. All right. As she says it with the relief. All right. So, credit. You know, I've got credit up there. I use credit more so to see if I need to get excited that this is really a good person. I don't really use it as a reason to turn somebody down. But if they come back with a 680 score, 700 score, I get excited.
Where do you like the ratio to be?
Well, ideally 650, 600 to 650 at least. But everybody doesn't have
I
that.
need the ratio.
Oh, the ratio? I do 3 times.
3 times?
Okay.
33%.
Well, for my economy rentals, 2.5 times I'm okay with.
Okay. That's around that percent.
Okay. Yes? What do you mean? That's income?
No, that's going against their income.
Oh, so you're talking more about after okay, say they got so much income.
Yeah, but they're maxed out on everything.
I like what one landlord suggested to me that I've adapted. He said after all the expenses are done, do they have at least $1,000 in disposable income? Or do they have 500? You use whatever figure works for you. But do they have a certain amount of disposable income after all expenses are done? And you use a number that's comfortable for you.
Just kind of keep the discussion on the disposable income side.
Yeah, after all the expenses, how much extra income do they have left over?
Well, I meant years ago when you taught us about garnishable income, that was fabulous.
Okay?
But, so now disposable income, because some
No, that we're talking 2 different things here.
I know.
I'm not saying, I'm still suggesting to you as much as possible, deal with people who are garnishable. But even if they're garnishable, they have expenses. So after all the expenses goes, how much income is left over? So we're talking 2 different things.
I understand.
Okay.
Kind of get close.
They'll need help on that deposit.
Well, I did that too, but I come up on the deposit.
Another thing to consider is, do they have any money in a bank account? What is your minimum that you're looking for in a bank account?
Well,
Oh, no, but you're not looking for 60,000.
well, no, but I mean their income.
It's already been assigned to somebody.
Gotcha. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here, as you're thinking about ways to have your criteria, one of the criteria that I look at now, that I didn't used to look at in the past, is do they have any money in the bank at all?
Comment about that.
Okay, but this is just one of the things I'm looking at. If you haven't been paying rent in the last 2 years, then I'm not going to rent to you anyway. But for those who have been paying,
You won't necessarily know because you weren't for it.
what you mean you don't necessarily know?
How do you get the information?
Okay, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but are you asking for proof of rental payment for the last 4 to 6 months? So if you're asking for proof of rent payment, then you would know if they're paying. What? You're looking at the time. Chris, what time is it?
Oh, it's 3:05.
Oh, 3:05? 3:06, okay. So, yeah, I want to know proof of rent payment. Show me receipts, show me a ledger, get one from your landlord, show me many of the property management software programs, the owner or the property management company can print it out for them. But I want to see proof, because you're right, there's a lot of people that haven't paid.
But how do you get like bank account info? I mean,
You ask for it.
if they want to prove there's money in an account.
You ask for it. They can get it to you. If they don't trust you, then you don't want
I
them.
trust that they're going to give me something that's legitimately theirs.
Oh, I understand.
And how do you overcome that?
That's a good question. In fact, there's a document screening service that you can use. In fact, I think it's one mentioned as a resource in your booklet that will tell you if it's something that has been forged or fake. Because there are a lot of people that are providing fake pay stubs.
Yeah, they are.
So,
Fake IDs.
yep. So I'm glad you're all aware of that. Rental history. I have a scoring system, by the way. My scoring system is, well, it's a point system. You get so many points for each thing. That's the way I found it works best for me. I don't have like a blanket thing where you got to have each of these things. If you're weak in one area, by using a scoring system, if you're strong in other areas, you can make up for a weakness in one area. Now, I don't want to rent to you if you've just been evicted. Nothing's going to make up for that. But let's say your credit is not all that great, for whatever reason, but you got great rental history, you got great income history, then that can make up the difference for the low credit. My scoring system, yeah, it's in there. Oh, somebody said page 94. Income history. In fact, when I'm saying a scoring system, so for rental history, if you've been with us for at least 1 year, you get 1 point, 2 years, 2 points, 3 years, 3 points. Income history. Notice I say income, I don't say employment history. Because in many states, you can't do it based on whether they're employed or not. You can only do it based on their income, period. And you got to take into account. Huh?
You get tax forms or what?
I get tax forms from people who are self-employed, but not from the normal persons. I'm not asking normal. From the people who are working for somebody else, I'm not necessarily looking for tax forms. I only ask for that if they're self-employed. Income history, 1 year of income, same source, 1 point, 2 years, 2 points, 3 years. I started asking too, when I contact employers, and you got to be careful there, because they might have somebody set up for you. In fact, I like to Google the company name and call the number that shows up on Google to find out if that person is working there. But I'm also asking, will this person be working in the foreseeable future? The foreseeable future. They won't tell you? Okay, now, you got a lot of people who's not telling you. I know some may not. But you're saying everybody that you ask tells you they won't tell you that?
They refer you to someplace you have to go and...
Yeah, we work or something.
It would be like they were deliberately trying to get rid of them.
All right, no, not the employer. But privacy issue? Okay, that's fine. But what I do is I try to get the resident to say, hey, I really want to rent to you, but there's a question that I need answered by your employer. Now, if you still can't get it, that's one thing. But I'm making that a standard thing I'm asking now. Again, everything may not come back, but the more information I have, the better I'll be able to choose between you and somebody else. Collectible, person talked about garnishable. I like people who are garnishable. If your state says source of income is a discrimination thing, then you got to be careful there. If your state does not have source of income as one of the categories of discrimination, then I'm looking for people who are garnished. Their wages, their income is garnishable. Cooperation, I told you, I look for people who are cooperative. Were you on time for the appointment? Did you bring a copy of the utility bill that I asked for? When I asked you, have you had any problems with your current landlord or manager, and you started going off on the deep end, that's a red flag to me that you're not cooperative. Are you using profanity in my presence? That lets me know you may not be cooperative. But there's little things that I'm looking for, tests, so to speak, to determine if people are cooperative. I want to work with people who are cooperative. I can't overemphasize that.
Can I go to that?
That's why I'm giving you objective things. Whether you're on time for the appointment or not is not subjective.
Yes, but the word that you have to screen cooperation, which is very subjective.
Oh, I don't have the word cooperation on my application.
Okay, I list my criteria.
Oh, don't put cooperation.
Okay, I don't have cooperation. I left it on.
Yeah, leave it off.
Okay, that was the question I was going to ask. I have some of my screening criteria.
But the thing is, under cooperation, even though I don't mention it on the application, I am still looking at certain categories when I'm screening.
Am I in trouble because I say some screening criteria?
Say that again?
On my application, I list my screening criteria.
Okay.
And it is labeled this is some of my screening criteria.
Why do you have to say that?
Because it doesn't include the word cooperation.
I don't think it's necessary to say this is some of my criteria. It can't hurt you by saying it. So what's your question to me? Does that hurt? No, that doesn't hurt.
Because
The only thing is, if you turn them down for something that's not listed there, that could be a problem.
that's the question I'm asking.
Oh, for me, anybody that's not cooperative, I don't say you're not cooperative. I use the reason underneath what I was looking for, non-cooperative. In other words, if you are late to the appointment, if I can't find anything else, I'll use that. More than likely, they don't meet one of the other criteria. But I would not say you're not cooperative because that's subjective.
All right, that's the thing I wanted to get at.
Okay.
Because all right.
All righty. Move-in date. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. Criminal history is important. Now, some states now, they're saying that you can't even screen for criminal history. Would you believe that?
Well, you can't use it.
You can't use it as the reason for initially turning somebody down. And then in some states, they say you can use it, but you can't make it a blanket statement. In other words, I can't say I turn everybody down who has criminal history. That cannot be my policy, a blanket statement like that. Okay, it's based on, I have to say it's based on done on an individual basis.
And that's discriminating.
No, it's not. It's done on an individual basis where we look at how recent the history is. Does it affect housing or other people? You can do it based on that, but you can't make a blanket statement because, in other words, if somebody had a misdemeanor jaywalking, which has nothing to do with housing, a judge would have a hard time in these days saying you're making a blanket statement for criminal history. Or if they have some misdemeanors that, again, aren't related to housing, aren't related to a danger or harm to other people.
Yeah, like that aggressive type crime or something.
If it's something that shows that affects housing or affects other people, you can use that. But if it doesn't, judges now are not, in fact, they're saying, I don't know, maybe it's a petty thief or something. They're actually using the term, what's the term? Disparate
impact.
Disparate impact. Basically saying, for whatever reason, some races have more of a criminal history than others. So because of that, you can't just make a blanket statement that you're turning down criminal history because that says that's affecting one race more so than another. But you still can do it, but you can't just blanket statement. It's got to be things that affect the housing or affect possible harm to other individuals. You can still do it that way, but I can't just make a blanket statement. All right, move-in date. When's your move-in date? That's one of the things I look at, but I don't disregard planners. I don't disregard people who are looking to move 4 months, 6 months down the road. And he told me it was 10 after 3, so we're going to stop there for the moment. One person asked the question, if you bill somebody for damages and they don't pay it, what do? There is a clause in the lease, and we'll get to that. It's the rent allocation clause. The rent allocation clause says that all monies that are paid, I'm paraphrasing it, we'll see it in a little bit, but all monies paid first go toward unpaid damages, fees, or charges, then it goes toward rent. What's the point? The point here is if I have to charge somebody for damages, they don't pay it, I then take it out of the next money that comes in. Now what are they short on? Rent. And so now I take them to court, if I have to take them to court, for rent as opposed to money owed for damages, because I found most judges have a hard time giving you money for unpaid damages, but it's easier to get them to give you money for unpaid rent. So it kind of keeps it cleaner.
Have you tested that in court?
I haven't had to as of yet. So no, I haven't tested it.
These days, when it's unpaid rent, they're just saying, oh, it's all due to COVID, and so.
Right. So no, I haven't tested that, to answer your question.
I've seen it tested in court.
And the landlord won.
Yes, but you have to have a second clause too.
Okay. All righty. Additional screening practices. As I mentioned to you, scoring system, somebody said that's on which page? 94. New resident to identify first qualified resident. Notice it says to identify first qualified resident. We number our applications as they come in. If they come in at the same time, they get the same number. I screen them in the order in which they come in. From a fair housing standpoint, even though it's not a law, the safe practice is to judge them in the order that they come in. That's the safe practice. I've had discussions with fair housing individuals. I've had discussions with other landlords, and they say, well, since it's not a law, you actually have a right to choose the most qualified applicant, not necessarily the first qualified applicant. The safer, cleaner way is to do the first qualified applicant. However, if you want to do the most qualified, you need to disclose that up front, that we are collecting more than one application at this time, and we are selecting the most qualified applicant of those that are being submitted. So you need to disclose that to the residents who are applying to help cover yourself. All right. Facebook and Google, I referred to Google a few minutes ago when I said Googling the company name to find out what's the phone number for the company they say they work for, and then contacting them directly to see if somebody is employed there. I always Facebook individuals now. That's a standard practice before I get final approval.
That's the best gift we've ever been given.
That's the best what now? Gift? Facebook from a screening standpoint?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. So if you're not using Facebook as part of your screening process, I would suggest that that be one of the things that you Facebook your applicants, depending on what stage in the process. So when I initially do the screening, like I mentioned to you earlier, I'll start off with just doing it on surface, checking on the surface to see if they meet the criteria. Then the next step, I'm doing my reports, which usually is part of that first step. But then as we go down further, I'm now Facebooking to see if I can find out if there's some animals, pictures of animals, for example, and they said that there was no animals on the property. On your application, just another tip, how many animals do you have? Not do you have any pets. How many animals do you have? Notice I didn't even say how many pets. How many animals do you have? Describe animal 1, describe animal 2, and let them describe it for you. Current address, tax assessor's website. Some landlords don't like to take the word that the address, the landlord that they gave them on the application is the real landlord. So they look up the tax assessors, who's paying the taxes on it to see if that matches with the current landlord. I see you smiling. That's something that you do? Okay. Along those lines, a lot of landlords call the landlord before the current landlord, because the current landlord might just be trying to get rid of the person. The other one has less skin in the game, so they'll be more likely to tell you the real deal. Anybody use LinkedIn to see if they're to check employment information? Yes, okay. When calling landlord given, change up the facts. What do I mean by that? They say they're paying $800 a month. Say you're calling to verify if they're paying you $950. If they're just a fake landlord that's ready to get rid of them, or a fake, they're ready to say yes to whatever question you have. If they tell me yes, that they're paying $950 and on the application it says $800, I know I'm not talking to somebody who's giving me the straight, so I can just stop the conversation at that point. Just little tricks to make sure you're talking to the right people. I told you earlier about a copy of the utility bill along with a copy of the pay stubs. Anybody ask for a copy of the current lease? No. See what kind of rules they were being governed by? Also use it as research, market research for yourself. Add all expenses. This is what we were referring to earlier. Is there any discretionary funds left after? I use the term disposable. Is there any discretionary funds left over after you add up all the expenses? There's a couple of calculators on the Mr. Landlord website, free calculators to use. I don't know if any of you have ever used them. One gives you a prorated rent amount. One also does it from a screening standpoint. We talked about a ratio of 3 times the amount. Well, you put the numbers in, and it allows you to plug in the numbers and see if that person meets 3 times. You say, well, Jeffrey, that's easy math. Yeah, it might be easy math, but it's easy for me just to plug it in real quick. I can compare 3 residents at one time, 3 applicants at one time based on the amount of income that they're receiving. So it's under, you go to MrLandlord.com, there's a section for freebies. Freebies. And under freebies, there's some landlord calculators that you might want to take advantage of. Is any emergency funds in the bank account? I referred to that before the break. And beware of red flags. Page 63. That's going back some, so I don't know if 63 is the right number or not. Well, yeah, that's in screening, so it might be the right number. 63. No. Red flags are found in this manual, current manual, on page 83. 83. Additional screening note. Be aware of these red flags when you screen prospective residents. Be aware of these red flags. I actually asked my property manager, my assistant, something spelled wrong?
No. I've heard that.
Yeah.
So what they do is they tell them, I got a computer flag.
Gotcha. Excellent. Thank you for that suggestion. Everybody caught that? So ask them to go ahead. Well, I've got a computer handy. Can you print out the pay stubs, one of them or a couple of them for us right now? So I like that idea. What were the last thing we were talking about? Oh, red flags. And I'll come to your question or comment in a second. I just want to say this. My assistant is very familiar with the red flags that are listed here. So one of the questions I sometimes ask her, have we been getting applicants with red flags? And what type of red flags have we been getting? In fact, sometimes, every now and then, I like to just kind of, as a check and balance, the applications that she receives, she'll make a score on them. But for a check and balance, every now and then, I want to review them as well. Now, I haven't met the people, so I haven't had a chance to visually see them or hear them. And some of these red flags are related to what you can visually see or hear. So if I'm reviewing an application, I say, were there any red flags? For example, they say one person's moving in, but 3 people are in the car. Or when they're talking to the applicant, somebody is talking beyond the person who's supposedly applying, and you hear things like, well, we had a question. We? We? So little things like that. In fact, some will even stay in the car while the first person comes out. And I said, well, did you happen to look in the car to see if there was more than one person that came? And there may be a legitimate reason that there's more than one person there. But again, I like her to be aware of any potential red flags. Now, your comment?
It's to that, I'm
Uh-huh.
and so they'll say 3, and there's like 4 kids.
Okay.
And so there's a, and
Okay. And how does the question read on your application, by the way?
I asked them how many individuals are going to, how many persons will be living in the property.
Okay. And then they just outright tell you 3.
Yeah.
They don't consider their children people.
You have a comment in reference to that? Oh, I don't reject them based on a red flag. See, the way I use red flags, the way I'm suggesting that, well, the way I use red flags is just to make our antenna go sky high to see if we can find a legal reason to turn them down. But most of the red flags, I'm not going to turn them down because you had a red flag because there was an extra person in the car, or whatever.
What happens if it's gone sky high?
If they really have several red flags, I always find a legal reason to turn them down. Always. So I'm not sure. I can't answer it any kind of different than that. It may be one time out of 50 where I saw some red flags, but everything looked good on the application, and then in that case, I go ahead and rent to them. But usually, in almost all cases, if there's several red flags, I'm going to find a legal reason to turn them down. But the red flags makes me look harder, if that makes sense too. Okay. Yep. Yep. And then if it's a red flag, if you have a red flag, maybe that's not on here, maybe it is actually a legal reason why you can turn them down. So I would ask you to really look at the red flag that you're talking about, and how can you make sure it's an objective, something that you can objectively measure or see, or it's an objective reason, not a subjective, because a lot of the red flags are subjective in terms of whether they are actually a problem or not. Playing loud, when they call on the phone and you hear a whole bunch of loud music in the background. Well, for some people that might be okay. To me, that's a little bit of a red flag, but that's totally subjective. So I'm not going to turn them down because they got a song playing in the background that's laced with a whole bunch of profanity. But to me, that's a little bit of a red flag. But, to each its own. But it still causes me to kind of look a little bit harder. But if that makes sense what I'm saying. But it may be a red flag that is a legitimate reason to turn somebody down. I'm trying to think of one right now off the top of the head. I can't think quickly. I'm usually pretty good on my feet, but I'm trying to think of something that you might see as a red flag. I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Yeah, there was a statement earlier about cooperation.
Yes.
All they have to show some hostility.
Yes.
And that's subjective, but it's probably a good reason to turn them down.
Gotcha. But it is subjective. All right. Now, if they are hostile and they act that out in any way, that's a legitimate reason to turn them down. If they get angry and start yelling and screaming, that's not subjective. I can turn them down for that reason. In fact, let me make sure I say this in a way that is clear. I use the final new resident orientation as my last step in the screening process. I see it as my last step in the screening process. So they're getting ready to sign the lease. If they come in there and, using the example that I just showed, for whatever reason, they're acting hostile, and they actually maybe even start to touch the property manager in some way. I give her permission at any point, if you feel that this person is going to be a danger, or at any point they are going to be a serious problem for whatever reason, stop the process. We will not give them the keys. We will not move forward. If they start using a whole bunch of profanity in front of you right then, for whatever reason, stop the process. So I use that as my last step in the screening process. So I don't just assume because you're coming for the lease signing that we're going to go through with the lease signing. If that's clear on what I'm attempting to share, that's my final step. Hold on to that thought because I'm trying to get through several things here. Where do we leave off? Emergency, beware of red flags. In fact, that's why and not rent it until it's rented. Just because somebody gets approved, by the way, doesn't mean it's rented. Until they give me the deposit, until they give me all the move-in costs, it's not rented. In fact, I'll continue to screen and accept applications. I want to have a backup application in case this first person, for whatever reason, does not go through. It is not rented until it is rented. Very important point. I've heard too many landlords come back and tell me, yeah, I had it rented, so I stopped showing it to people, and I held it for them for a week. They came, or they called and said, we've decided not to rent it. And you have no other applications lined up to move on it. So to me, it's not rented till it's rented. So I'll get another approved application lined up. And I don't like to hold places that long, to be honest with you. I don't like to hold places without money. If they paid all the money, paid the first month's rent, even if they're moving in a month, I'll go ahead and hold it under those circumstances. And even with that, they're filling out a form that says, this is a holding fee. This is a holding fee. If for some reason you change your mind, this is non-refundable. I don't call it a holding deposit. I don't call it the security deposit. Until you move in, it's a fee, reservation fee. Once you move in, it's now transferred into money that can be used toward deposit or toward rent. But it's a reservation or a holding fee up to that point, and they sign very clearly to that effect. All righty. Not rented until it's rented. Websites, tenantcreditcheck.com. I mentioned earlier that I do my applications for $9.95 for the credit reports. That's done through tenantcreditchecks.com. In fact, they're one of our website sponsors, and there's some literature in your materials that you receive, but I've been happy with them. I've been using them for close to 15 years. Real customer service is really good, but that's just an example. Forms to highlight. Rental application. This rental application that's on page 95 just has some of the questions that you might want to consider adding to your application.
Can I ask about something on page 85?
Go ahead, real quick. In fact, this is 85. I said 95. My eyesight is off. This is on page 85. Rental application?
Okay,
Or rental information and application instructions.
I'm looking at number 11. In my area, maybe this is just my area.
Okay. I hear you. In fact, that's been there for a while. It's probably one that needs to be taken out. All right. By the way, what's the purpose of this rental information and application instructions? What's the purpose here? It's given to them with the application. In other words, here's something that I want you to look at this as you're filling out the application. It's telling you every application must be such and such, any false statement. It's not the application, it's information about and instructions on doing the application. I don't know if any of you do that, but that's what that is. That's not actually the application, that's instructions on filling out the application. In fact, on there, number 4, applicants are not accepted on a first come, first served basis, but on a best qualified basis. So that's letting them know, that's disclosing that we're not doing it on a first come, first served basis. Copy of pay stubs may be required to verify income. Again, just stuff that they need to know in filling out the application. And a sample application is on page 86 through page 88. Let's see, most of them are standard type questions, but those that might be one you hadn't thought of. Well, I'm sure you have questions like ever evicted or asked to leave. I'm asking people now, has there ever been any court case filed against you by your previous landlord or manager?
I've all been asked to leave.
Okay? Yeah, or asked to leave is the one that's on there right now. That's down toward the bottom of page 86. But I'm saying, I used to just have on there any evictions. But just like me, sometimes I'll start the court case, they'll pay the money, and then they'll end up staying. But I want to know if you've ever been taken to court, period. Because I'm taking that into account. And it's nothing illegal about turning somebody down because they've been taken to court. Even though they end up paying the money, that's a problem for us. So you've been taken to court 2 or more times? No, that won't work. Because I know what it is to go to court and the hassle and the things that's involved with that, and we don't have to do that. So again, that's just a new question that I've started asking, especially during this whole pandemic scenario. Has a case been filed against you? I told you I'm also adding, can we inspect your current home? All applicants are subject to an in-home inspection. That's not on there now. That's one I'm going to be adding to the application. In fact, what I do is I simply take questions from this. My application is not this per se. It's 2 pages taking questions from this. I'm putting this on here because some people like more questions than others. In fact, the application that I use, if you went to mrlandlord.com under freebies and clicked application, you would see a 2-page application option on there. Let's see if there's anything else I want to ask.
Quick question.
Yes?
It refers to a rental transaction disclosure form. What is that?
Where are you looking at?
Page 85.
85. Oh, okay. Every application must be accompanied by an application fee, a signed rental transaction disclosure form, and the lead payment disclosure, if applicable. You know, good question. I'm trying to remember. What is that? A signed rental transaction disclosure form. I don't know.
Okay.
Applicants don't even ask me that question. And we don't really require it. I need to make a mark so that I'll make sure that that just needs to be removed because it's not, we don't do that anymore. 8 on page 85. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I don't know if that's a fancy word for some type of rent payments paid in the past. Sometimes I get too fancy for myself. Okay. Where are we? I was just giving you different things on the application that additional income, verifiable sources of income that you like to consider. I used to just ask the normal questions, what's the income? But by asking additional income, verifiable sources of income, I find that people start putting down some more things. And I want to know if there's some more things and instead of waiting to find out later. For example, they may have, what's some of the things? Child support. They might even have a part-time second job that they didn't put down. Of course, if they can verify it and show me a track record, then we'll take that into account. I don't consider unemployment, which is becoming a questionable thing in my state on whether I need to start including it or not. But at least up to recently, I have not considered unemployment income as a source of income because it's temporary. And that's what I've continued to say. I just have to check to make sure that's still the case in my state. Any temporary source of income, I don't count as income. Let's see. I told you how many animals do you have is something that's being added, and I don't think there's any. If you have a question about anything else on there, feel free to ask me. You may say, well, are you asking, do you have any of these skills? Electrical, painting, plumbing, roofing, heating. Remember earlier I told you when I was going through a certain phase and I didn't want to deal with maintenance? That's when that question was asked. I still keep it in there, but that's when that question came about, when I was looking for people who could take care of some things.
How's that worked out for you?
It worked out great during that time.
That's worked out great for me.
Yeah.
I love that question.
Okay. Worked out great. Because I'd start to give preference to individuals that could do that. Now you say, well, how can you give preference? Is there discrimination? No, but I still, in my mind, I'm like saying, okay, I see that. Let me see what we can do with the other people. All righty. Let's see. Do you give anything else unique here? Let me move on. Fair housing, equity, equal housing opportunity. We've already talked about that. Application addendum, acceptance of terms. I'm trying to see anything I really want to bring to your attention. On page 93, it talks about a pet application registration. I have a separate application that I use specifically for pets. Because the little application, I don't want to just stop with, do you have any pets? Describe them. After I get that, if they say yes to that, and they're applying to the property, I want more information on them. And that's what page 93, the pet application registration, is for. Updated registration, resident information on 92. I use that especially when I inherit properties. I also use it when somebody's been in my property for a couple of years and I want to get updated information. I would strongly encourage you, if somebody's been in your property for 2 or more years, get updated information, especially employment information, bank information, because when they do go out, move out, if you don't have that updated information, you won't be able to easily garnish their bank account. You won't be able to easily garnish their wages. So have updated information. I used to didn't think about that much till I had some individuals to move out and found out my information that I had was outdated. They were no longer working. They had been paying okay to the point that they moved out. But now it's too late. Well, not too late, but I got to go through hassles to find out where they're working, find out if they have a bank account. New resident to identify. We already talked about the scoring checklist. There's a pet checklist as well. Scoring pet checklist on page 87. Reasonable accommodation request. If somebody does say, I need something like a ramp or something, okay, fill out this form for a reasonable accommodation request, and then we'll verify what's needed to make that happen. Assistance animal application process form. Even though I said to you, I'm going to look at all the criteria and see if they meet all of my criteria. If they tell me they have an assistant animal, I still want them to fill out that form, which I got from, I don't know if I got that from petscreening.com, but I got it from somewhere in which they suggested that anybody applying who says they have an emotional assistance animal, have them fill out that, and so that maybe they look at that and they start to say, maybe I don't have an emotional assistance, or maybe I don't want to go through the steps to fill it out, answer the questions. But in other words, I'm giving them an extra step that they have to go through. Law enforcement report waiver. That's basically saying I have a right to check with the law enforcement personnel, law enforcement in the area, to see if you have any criminal history directly with our local area. So after that, we're really just looking at how do you prove, how do you verify. We got some of this stuff you can just, every now and then, I get an employer who says, no, you got to fax me a verification form. Or a landlord who says, you got to send me something to verify. I can't just go on you calling up. So that's why we got these different employment information verification, landlord verification, bank reference verification. All those are just different verification forms in case somebody says, I need you to send me a form. If you turn somebody down based on their credit, legally you have to send them a denial based on credit report. Legally you have to send them a denial letter that was based on their credit. And that's what page 109 is, an example of turning somebody down based on their credit. A thing that I have never used myself, but another landlord told me that he has used it. I said, well, let me put it in my handbook of forms because it may come in handy at some point. But page 110, verification and authorization for transfer of a security deposit. In other words, you're asking the current landlord to transfer the deposit they have on your applicant to you. He says that he's had success with that. I'm wondering how that would work, because I know for myself, I would never transfer the deposit to a future landlord if they're still in my property. But he says it's something that he's used in the past. I said, okay, let me make a copy of it, and if it comes in handy at some point, I may use it. Transfer utility form, holding fee receipt. 112, we talked about giving money while I'm holding a property. There's the receipt that I use, the holding fee receipt, that they sign, saying that if something happens, you change your mind, I keep the money, basically. But the point is, they disclose that they have been made aware that the money will be non-refundable. If not, legally, you cannot keep a deposit, a security deposit, because somebody changed their mind. You can keep a fee, but if you just said, give me your deposit and you'll move in 2 weeks, your security deposit now, you cannot keep that if they change their mind in 2 weeks. Because that's not one of the legal reasons why you can keep a security deposit. This hand, and then I'll come here.
I learned from the past, so I put it on my lease.
You put what on your lease?
Deposit would be forfeited if they change their mind, not the whole thing.
I'm just suggesting to you, don't call it a deposit. Do not call it a holding fee, call it a reservation fee, but don't call it a deposit. Your question.
If you do a holding fee, will you have them sign the lease at the time that you take the fee, or 2 weeks later when they're actually moving in?
Say that one more time. They're moving in 2 weeks.
When do you sign the lease? Now or
Some landlords like to sign it then. I mean, at the time that they're getting the money. I don't do it till we're getting ready to give you the keys. That's me. Anybody got any comments on that different? That if they're going to move it in 2 weeks, do you have them sign the lease now? For some landlords, that they say that works for them. Now they actually have a lease in effect, they say, and so if they change their mind, well, technically you're still responsible because you signed a lease.
will we make it more difficult to get them out then?
So I'm just throwing out different options to you. Some landlords do that. For me, I signed the lease on the time that I'm giving them the keys. Speaking of lease, and then there's an example of approval of rental application. Here's what I send to somebody, but they really don't care about that all that much. Me telling them over the phone that they've been approved is good enough. Approval and move-in checklists. Page 118. We're into the next another whole section now.